In the words of Bill Gates, generative AI has the potential to change the world. In this episode of Intelligent Tech, we're going to discuss developments in generative AI this year and the fantastic guests we've had on this series. We're joined today by Charles Kerrigan, a partner in our team here at CMS and editor of one of the first legal textbooks on AI.
Charlie, we love working with you. It's a lot of fun, but should Isabel and I be concerned that we might not have jobs in the future? What do you think?
You should not be concerned because you guys use the tools. I think it was fascinating hearing all of your guests, and particularly they've got tech development backgrounds. But for me, the most significant thing of the last year has been everybody has had the opportunity to see just how amazing this technology is. We had that early quote from Elon Musk that Gen AI is scary good. I think that's been borne out. The speed of development through the year is astonishing. We know it works better in conjunction with people. So it's making sure that people have got the understanding of how it works, loads of practice, know what it's not so good at, know where it's getting its information from so that you can test it. Don't assume anything about it, but for sure we will always need people who are supporting the technology in the same way as we've got people developing the technology. It's assisting with code and code completion. I see lawyers in pretty much the same position, that it will be a supportive technology for those people who have got a broad experience and expertise and an open mind and curiosity.
Excellent. And as you know, Charlie, one of our guests was Jonathan, who is the founder of Self, an AI-powered personal assistant, which we were both very excited to hear about. Do you foresee a future where all lawyers will have these sort of AI assistants in their day-to-day lives?
Yeah, I think so. I think they will come with the job. Yeah. One of the questions that we're all figuring out, I think, inside law firms, in private practice, also inside the in-house departments at clients, is to what extent is the role changing? Yeah. I think the thing that we shouldn't assume is the job stays the same, but with a really good assistant. Yeah. I think the implications of all of this are that the job changes. Yeah. Some of the aspects of the job that have been more administrative or more repetitive won't be done by the lawyer with the assistant. They'll just be sort of abstracted out into the broader technology ecosystem. Yeah. That the firms are working with. And so that leaves the lawyers with questions around how to approach projects, how to deploy the assistants, what data points that are private are significant and may not initially be available to the assistants, but then become available as the private ecosystems are supported by the assistants. So it's a combination. I think it's impossible to predict quite where it lands, but
lawyers are mutating.
Something
quite special.
Yeah, and I think being curious about how the work that you currently do changes. Yeah. As a result of this. It's not the work is the same work, but you've got a quicker, more efficient way of doing it. It changes the work. So that's the really interesting piece, I think, that we all spend time talking about.
Yeah. And Charlie, we spoke to Mansoor from Open Origins. He spoke a lot about how AI can be used to detect deepfakes. And he spoke specifically about the insurance industry and the financial services industry. We work with clients in that space. Is there a role for lawyers and perhaps some type of legal tech to play in that kind of area? And can we do more for clients to kind of combat fraud and deal with those sorts of issues?
Yeah, I think all clients are now operating in a digital economy. And there is a radical misinformation, disinformation problem on the internet. The internet was built without security embedded in it. Again, we spend a lot of time talking with the crypto clients about Web3 being an internet built with security and identity. This feels like it's part of that combination, that the two things will sit together, blockchain at its heart is an information verification system. So it's a good solution to some of the problems that AI is throwing up. And I guess we'd all see those operating together. And the relevance for clients is bringing automation to production of content, production of materials, production of what's being seen by customers in public and private spheres, but also some ability to watermark that and timestamp it, all the things that blockchain technologies bring. So these two things looking like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, I think Gen AI obviously, answers a lot of, it provides solutions to a lot of problems that we have, but it also has a huge risk element to it, like deepfakes, for example, propaganda. Should we be concerned about the UK's approach to governing AI? The UK government has come out and said it has no plans for any domestic regulation in the short term. Is that a good thing, or is that a bad thing for AI in the UK and in London?
Yeah, so there's always a spectrum. Where do you take the position between a consumer protection focus, consumer harms, and innovation pro-industry approach? We see that play out with the EU AI Act, which is receiving some criticism from lobbyists and commentators who see the world from the perspective of big tech. The EU AI Act looks like classic EU legislation. It's consumer-focused, human-in-the-loop, human-centric. So no surprises where that came from. I think the final, the closing piece of that over the last week and weekend before we're filming was interesting, as we see foundation models potentially blow up the agreement. But we're through that. I think so much work had gone into it, and it is such a landmark from the EU's perspective. In the UK, we've been looking at this for 7 years. I think January 2017 was my first time in the UK Parliament in the parliamentary AI group, trying to figure out what policy would look like. And as you say, we're now here approaching 2024, still with a lack of certainty on where that lands, and likely different views between the different political parties, although we haven't quite seen what the Labour Party intends for this yet. The difficulty is, we saw it with the online safety bill. This is really complex to manage the technology. So you've got complex technical issues, you've got complex policy issues, you've got complex issues around where the technology is developing to. I think once the EU AI Act is now, we've had the text land, people would be preparing to comply with it.
Which is so important because of its extraterritorial scope. It's important and it affects all our clients.
It sure does, yes.
And it begs the question, how can clients be compliant when the technology is this complex? And we had obviously Sean from AM Partners come on the show and discuss his tool. And what's your take on that, Charlie? These sort of compliance tools, how important are they? How integral will they be to our clients' business?
I think we need tools. So digital is scalable, and we're therefore going to have tools that assist with compliance. So the first thing, whenever we're looking at AI deployments within a client or within an organization, there are generally thousands, and there isn't always a list of them. And the things that the EU Act is looking for businesses to do, which is identify, characterize by reference to levels of risk and potential harm, to be in a position to be able to report to a regulator. All of that, whether you're subject to the Act or not, that's kind of makes sense. Even if you can't be subject to enforcement proceedings under the EU Act because you're in a jurisdiction that it doesn't touch, you have no engagement with the EU at all. If things go wrong with AI, which they do, there will be a remedy at law one way or another under the various statutory and common law harms. So being able to, and we see this again with a lot of domestic clients, saying from a good practice and risk management perspective, being able to demonstrate compliance in the broadest sense with identification and categorization is naturally a good way of approaching a response to these technologies.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most important things in compliance is actually the huge data sets that are being used to power these LLMs. We had Patronus AI come on the show to talk about their product, and they've been dubbed the Moody's of AI, which is, I think, fantastic. I think we definitely need it. Do you foresee sort of our clients in the future all, having this sort of rating for the AI that they use? Do you think that will happen? Do you think it's important?
Yeah, more or less. So I think some sort of audit is significantly important. That's kind of what the EU Act is driving towards. And the ability to demonstrate that there was a thoughtful process in responding to use of AI. I know we have this conversation a lot in the team, that the shortest answer to someone saying, I want to have the lowest possible risk in relation to AI is just not to use it. But that's impossible. The technology is far too good. All of your customers are using it. It's on all the smartphones and everywhere.
And it's fantastic. It's changing all our lives for the better. It just has to be used in a safe and pragmatic way. And companies need to be held accountable for the AI that they deploy and that they use, and understand it, and not be afraid of it, I think.
Yeah, and there can be different approaches taken to new technologies. So Charlie, you and I often talk about open source technology and Vitalik Buterin and different people in the blockchain space that are approaching things with a kind of very open kind of mind. We were lucky enough to talk to Nick from Flower Labs, who told us all about federated learning. Do you think there's a role for groups, perhaps here in London and parts of the UK, to come together and kind of take a kind of less capitalist approach to this technology and kind of educate people? And do you think perhaps education is an important thing for people to focus on? Perhaps politicians and whatnot should focus on educating the public.
Yeah, it's the most important. And fortunately, it's not difficult to become educated in AI. There's lots of available material. The internet is fantastic as a resource. And lots of the folks who've been developing in it are giving away educational materials because they need to be in a position where there isn't a mistrust of the technology. I think it's interesting, we often see surveys and polling around public views of the technology, and you can't really get a read. So the question tells you what the answer is going to be. If you ask people about AI, they're not sure what their opinion is. If you ask them in the context of it's helpful in curing diseases, then obviously they're hugely in favor. If you ask them in the context of it can magnify online harms, then they're hugely against. So it's such a broad family of technologies that it's impossible to have a kind of standalone position in relation to it. I think the policymakers and parliamentarians have done a good job of educating themselves and trying to bring that into communities. The thing that has struck me most is that they keep bringing the conversation back to this question around public good, and in particular, the potential for job losses, and it's kind of where we started. So often the conversation would revolve around new advances in the technology, or we'd have technical people come and explain the latest breakthroughs. But there was always a voice in the room saying, well, hey, I've got constituents whose industrial jobs were displaced and replaced by service sector jobs. And it sounds like those service sector jobs can be replaced by these new technologies. So what's in it for my constituents? How do you answer that question? And this is part of the wider debate. I don't think we have a single answer to the question, but the fact that in Parliament there's always at least one voice in the room saying, this is the most significant issue about AI. It's not the technical developments, it's how it relates to people, and societal trust will stand or fall off the back of that. So for sure, it's all of those things. But I think we've all spent all year playing with every version of the tools, and there's no better way of learning it than just going and figuring it out.
I'm finding that too. It's really just trial and error. And is there a particular tool perhaps that you've used this year that you're finding the easiest to use? I've used, as you say, I've used every single one, and they all seem to do a pretty good job, I think, at kind of, giving me back something that's useful. Is there one or two that you've kind of enjoyed or would sort of, want to keep using in the future? Or do you think it's good at this stage just to have a bit of experience with all of them?
I think if you try them all, you can see the advantages and disadvantages, the strengths. Some of the tools that are fantastic at coding don't even seem to have read internet encyclopedias. So they can give very weird answers to natural language questions. I think that there's lots of fun stuff around it. Say the image generation ones, I think have probably been the most fun, and people have experimented wildly with those across the internet. The ones for us, I guess, are connected to transparency and compliance and similar. So I think we certainly have, we see the policymakers in many places leaning towards ensuring that these systems are not black boxes. They may be even more effective as black boxes than if you can have them show they're working at different levels. But there's a lack of trust in relation to it. And then some industry level regulation makes it impossible to use them if they're not transparent. In financial regulation, the consumer duty makes it a very difficult job for a financial organization to justify the outcomes from a consumer duty perspective under the new regulation there, if they can't show how the decision was taken. The machines have got to demonstrate how they're making that decision in order for it to be justifiable from a consumer duty perspective at the bank.
Right. So I guess, part of what it will need to be avoided in the future is this situation where an organization is unable to say why they're making a decision in a particular way. And that's one of the large parts or purposes of the EU AI Act and other AI legislation that will exist in the future, is stopping that so that individuals and people in society won't be, having decisions made that, significantly affect their life, and livelihood.
Yeah. In particular, in relation to anything where, let's say, a medical, of course, decision is taken, or a social or financial decision. At a more trivial level, what we do see is if a smartphone or similar has more AI in it, people like it. They don't know that there's a greater degree of AI in it. They just feel like the thing works better. And if you take out some of that technology, people respond negatively. They think their phone has got more stupid. It doesn't understand what they want. So even when these things aren't described in the context of AI, having technology that is more supportive and just feels like it's a natural part of things. I think we've probably all had the experience of constantly pressing the forgot password button and being taken through page after page trying to remind you and reset you when you're sitting there in front of your computer in your home. So the technology will be valuable to people on what may seem like a trivial basis. It will just mean that their lives feel a bit easier to live, to the extent that they're not excluded from it.
It's the most user-friendly, easiest user face we've had to the internet
Yes.
ever.
Yes.
Which is just going to be life-changing for people, that can't type, that can just, talk to their computers and ask them questions. And I think it would be really really life-changing, and I think it's incredibly exciting. And to see the changes in this past year has just been mind-blowing.
Yeah, and it's also great to know that we'll still have jobs, Isabel.
I know, I mean...
Isn't that great?
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Can sleep at night.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I've learnt a lot from, I mean, the guests have been amazing, and watching you guys go through the interviews. And so each of the guests that you've had has had a different take on it, whether it's been security, whether it's been production of materials, whether it's been the human-centric version of things, whether it's been Nick and the last one, the groups of people working together, federated learning, and a social network, essentially, of people who are trying to figure these things out. All of that has been a real education through the year, and thanks so much for doing all the interviews and more to come.
Great. Thanks so much for being with us, Charlie. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings season 1 of Intelligent Tech to a close. Thank you so much for joining us this season. If you'd like to look back on past episodes, please visit our Intelligent Tech Hub.
And we've got a bunch of really exciting early stage AI clients. Perhaps you're working on a really interesting artificial intelligence problem and you'd like to be a client of ours too. If you are, please reach out.